Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Take Back My Brain podcast. I am your host, Laurie Hammer, and today our guest is Michelle Gauthier. She is a professional life coach, and she helps us busy women not feel overwhelmed and to create more calm and intention in our life. And so that's what our conversation is going to be about today. We're going to talk about the 4 unwritten rules that keep women in a constant state of stress. So as you're listening to this, make sure you share this because I know we all need this, and we need to understand how to navigate life just a little bit better. So Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
This is great. So before we got on, we were chatting about we're both wives and moms and we work at home and just kind of that juggling act that we have going on. So I would love to know how you got to be this, stay at home, work at home mom, and kind of what brought you to where you are.
Yeah. So I had a corporate career for about 20 years in financial services, and I worked really hard and was always like trying to make the next move up the corporate ladder. And that came from working really hard in school and always trying to get straight A's and all of that. So I had the personality where I was just always trying to go for the next thing and achieve. And at some point, I felt like I had achieved, like I remember thinking, I don't even really want to get to the next level anymore. I
Right.
felt like I had kind of gotten where I wanted to be, but it just didn't feel good anymore. It was supposed to be like, yes, this is everything I ever wanted, but instead I felt really stressed and overwhelmed and honestly really inauthentic because I was kind of trying to pretend that everything was perfect and like give this
Yeah.
illusion of my family looking so put together and perfect. And it wasn't. I mean, no one's perfect, but I couldn't see that. So I feel like I was kind of trying to project that my life was something that it wasn't, when underneath it felt pretty empty. And I felt the real need to be in service to
Yeah.
someone, to help people. Like I knew that I had a different calling, but I kept telling myself, but I've got to make this money and I've got to, it was very attached to what people thought of me. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, we never know what people think of us, but what I thought they were
What
thinking
we
is,
think they're thinking. Yeah.
yeah. I thought they were thinking, wow, she's got this amazing career. Why would she ever quit that and do something weird, like become a life coach? And,
Right.
really who was thinking that was me. I was just
Mm-hmm.
projecting that onto everybody else. So that's how I really got here, was just having quote unquote everything I ever wanted, but not feeling good about it. And I just decided, it was kind of a funny story. I was listening to a podcast one night and the guest was a life coach, and it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. I was like, that's it. It's exactly what I'm supposed to do. So eventually that would be a whole hour-long story, but basically
But you
I
got
had
there.
that moment. I, signed up for life coach training that day. I started studying, became a life coach, saw clients on the side, quit my job, and that's the rest of the story. I started seeing clients and working full time from home about 6 years ago.
Okay. That's fantastic. I love that story. Because,
Yeah.
yeah, so there's a lot to unpack in there because we're going to
Yes.
talk about, what are those rules? So you learned these rules as you're going through
Yeah.
this process. And I know I'm sure you've solidified those with all of your clients over the years, but let's talk
Yeah.
about those rules. What are they?
Yeah. So what I have learned from coaching mostly all women, on occasion I'll have a male client, but mostly all women, is that we're all feeling overwhelmed and stressed. And when
Yeah.
we try to get to the root of it, it's because we're trying to like comply with the way that we were raised or societal standards. And I like to think of them as rules, because rules, once we know them, we can decide if we want to follow them or not. And I think
Mhm.
most of us, myself included, were just following by those rules. And the first one I would say is to be perfect, but without effort. Like, don't make it look hard.
Right.
And I don't know if that resonates with you, but it's
It
like,
does.
I think a lot of times women want to present, I definitely did, as like the mom who does it all, but also has an amazing job and also has like a great relationship with her husband and makes like the Pinterest cookies for school things and all that stuff. But you can't ever like break a sweat, you have
Right.
to make it
Right.
look
Just
like it's easy. And I
June
don't know.
clear all the time.
Yes, exactly. So I don't know where this came from or how it developed societally speaking, but I think most women, especially moms too, can probably understand that. And I think what happens when we try to comply with that is that we end up feeling really alone because
Yeah.
you're not actually doing that, but you
Mhm.
feel like everybody else is doing that. And so it makes you kind of retreat and go into your own corner of like imposter syndrome.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
pretending that I'm someone that I'm not. So I think that's what I would say is sort of the first rule that women are kind of expected to live by. And then I think the second one is I found this a lot at work that as a woman, people are frustrated if we don't speak our mind and we don't kind of lead like you would traditionally think of men leading, but
Mhm.
also you can't upset anyone. So as women, we still have to be nice. And I mean, there's lots of studies that show that people will call women the B word if
Oh,
they are,
yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
authoritarian. Is that the word I'm trying to say? Authoritarian?
Authoritative. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And men are like good leaders, and women get called bossy and like little boys even you don't hear that about little
No,
boys.
it's a whole
Being
different set of
bossy.
standards for women than it is for men
Yeah.
as to how
Yeah.
to act. So if you have a very driven woman who wants to climb to that CEO ladder, she does get labeled that B word, or she does, like you just don't like her. There's because
Yeah.
I worked in corporate America for a while too with insurance, and mainly it was all women that worked in there. And we get a little catty. We get a little like
Yep.
junior high-ish when you all get together, right? And
Yeah.
it was a lot easier to accept something from a male supervisor in general than it would be from a woman supervisor. And
Yeah.
it's so weird to think that, like, why
Right.
why
Right.
are we that way? Because it's still the same authority, same position, but yet we have a whole different expectation for a woman in that position as opposed to a man.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And maybe it's because she wasn't living by the rules. Like the rules are you can be a leader, but you still have to be nice.
You still have to
You
be
can't.
nice, yeah. And
Yeah.
so, we're not always nice. We do have fluctuations in hormones, and sometimes we
Yeah.
don't feel nice and it comes out as not nice.
Yes, yes, exactly. And that's okay. Like men can be not nice, women can be not nice. I mean, I think that being not nice is more easily applied to women, what would just be called direct,
Yeah,
if a man was
yeah,
saying it. So I feel like when women are direct, a lot of times they get misunderstood. And
yep,
then I think the other one is that we're supposed to be like confident and pretty and pulled together, but not so much that you intimidate other women or that like someone's husband would turn their head at you or something. So we have
right?
all these physical standards. And I'm sure since you work a lot with like the body and those kinds of
Mhm.
things, all the standards that we're supposed to be complying to with our bodies and how we're
Right.
supposed to look and keep ourselves in shape. Again, not putting in too much effort or having too many muscles. It's like we're,
Where
you
where
know,
where do we have this balance? Yes.
yes, like we
You're
kind
losing
of
your mind.
can't win. Yes,
Yes.
exactly. And then I think the one that really put me over the edge was the rule that we have to balance multiple roles perfectly and make it look easy. Like all this stuff that we're talking about needs to be effortless. Like rise to the top, but always be nice. Be the perfect mom and the perfect worker, but don't ever break a sweat. It's just all of them are impossible. Every single one
Right.
of them is impossible. But I have seen in my clients over time that those kind of four things are what everybody's up against and the things that really make them feel like I can't do this. And it's correct because nobody can do
Can't.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I have a homeschooling friend, and she had, I forget how many kids she has, like 8 or something. And she's a speaker and she traveled, and anyway, she presented herself like this amazing, amazing mom. And like everything looked like it was all in order. And I said to her, "How do you do it all?" She goes, "Oh, sweetheart, I don't do it all." You know,
Yeah.
it looks like I do it all, but I don't do it all. And really underneath her life was quite a mess. And but the portrayal of it, and it made me so sad to find out, because her life just kind of fell apart. I'm like,
Yeah.
how it may not be to that degree, but I feel like all of us have probably experienced some level of life falling apart because we were believing all 4 of those lies.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And I don't know enough about your work yet to know, but I feel like that always presents itself in our body, when we're
Yes.
living that like inauthentic, I hate to call it a lie because you're not like outwardly lying, but you know what I'm saying. You're living in
Yeah.
a way, presenting something that isn't really true. And I feel like that's just really, first, our mind tells us it's not right. And if we don't listen, our body tells us like something isn't right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Your body will scream at you when it's not.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, the main problem with this is that we all end up feeling like we're not doing the right thing or that something's wrong with us. Like even your comment of how do you do everything? Because it looks like she's doing everything and we end up thinking that about ourselves.
Yeah.
Then we kind of isolate and feel like we're not lovable or worthy, which is never true. So I think as women, what that woman did, the gift she gave you when she said, "Oh, it's not perfect." I think that is the real turning point is for us as women just to be totally honest about how we feel. And I'm sure you've had lots of experiences of this in your life, but when you share something vulnerable, then you create connection instead of
Right.
isolation. And when
Yeah.
you do that, it's very rare that the other person isn't like, "Oh my gosh, me too. Yeah, I know exactly how
Yeah.
you feel." Yeah.
Yeah.
I just was teaching a workshop on Saturday and I had like 25 women in there and I had them go around and just say their name and then say what they do when they feel overwhelmed, like how they act when they feel overwhelmed. And many people said, "I yell at my kids or I yell at my husband." And at the end, like the biggest feedback I got was, "I can't believe everybody else also feels overwhelmed."
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
my work, I know nobody isn't overwhelmed at some
Right.
point,
I
but
know.
we all feel like, "Oh my gosh, I'm the only one who's like in my house before dinner time yelling at my kids and like wishing I didn't have to make
Mhm.
this dinner," and whatever, but we all feel it sometimes, and I think if we can share it with people close to us or even like the mom you see at Target when her kid's having a fit and she looks mortified just to be like, "I or, "I see ya," or,
Uh-huh.
some kind of encouragement to other women. I feel like that's what we really need to do to release ourselves from these crazy rules that we never signed up for in the first place.
Right. Right. And I think, I don't, do you have daughters?
I have one. Yep.
You have one daughter. I have a daughter. And I want to make sure that I've never imposed that, on her. But I
Yes.
think it just kind of comes from, people's expectations. She's going to be 18 in October, and people are asking her, "What are you doing next? What are you doing next? What are you doing next? What's your plan? What's your plan? What's your plan?" And she's like, "I don't know." And I'm like, "That's okay. It's okay
Yes.
that you just don't know. Let's just take the next step forward." Like, so, even as, young ladies, teenagers, there's still this pressure and, well, you have to figure out what you're going to do next. And it has to be something of like this level, you're not living to your potential. And, then you start ruminating in your own brain and you start, maybe creating that lie even bigger than what it was to the person who kind of prompted it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
you're not enough, you haven't accomplished enough,
Yep.
and then that becomes our identity of, who we're supposed to be. And
Yes.
I
Yeah.
don't
And
want
when
that for teenagers.
Right, and when we do that, like, let's just say she starts saying, I definitely wanna go to college," and then she goes to college and people are like, "How's it going? What are you gonna do after that?" Then she goes on and does the next thing, and then we start attaching our value and our enoughness to those kinds of things, like
Exactly.
to where you go to school or where you work or what kind of
Yeah.
grades you get or, what kind of husband you have, whatever
Mhm.
the situation is, which I think is really dangerous territory because
Yeah,
we're
absolutely.
we're worthy no matter what. And I think a lot of times because we don't feel like enough, we try to attach outer things to make us feel worthy or enough. And it never works because that's not where
Yeah,
it
you
comes
still
from.
you still feel empty. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So what do you teach? How do we overcome these four
Yeah.
lies? We say unwritten rules, but I'm like, those are lies.
Yes, I
Yes.
like that actually. Maybe we should just start calling them lies.
Yeah.
I think the very first step, and I think this is the step anytime we want to change something, is just acknowledging it.
Judging.
So for
Yeah.
sure, I made it to 40 something years old without knowing that I was trying to be perfect and that I was trying to get admiration of other people,
Mhm.
and that was what fueled me. I didn't even realize I was doing it. So if any of these things that I've said today resonate with you, rest assured, A, you're not alone, and B, the only thing you have to do is just notice that you're doing it, that you've like
Mhm.
accidentally think about it like an email and you're like, why did I get this email? I need to unsubscribe from this. So
Yeah.
now you're in the, why did I get this email? Where did I get this message? I
Right.
want to unsubscribe from it. So the first is just noticing without judgment. If you've been following all four of these your whole life, it's not a big deal. You can change it. There's still plenty of time. It's never too late. You can model it to your daughters and even your sons. I feel like we need
Mhm.
to model
Right.
this to everyone. And then I think the second part is just what you and I are doing right now. Talk about it.
Mhm.
Talk to people about it, share with other women. I remember when I worked in corporate, there was a woman who was like my boss's boss. She was way up there, high, and she had three little kids. And I had just come back from maternity leave with my first child. And I was like, Susan, how do you do it? How do you keep it all together? And she's like, oh, I don't. I cry every single night on the way home from work, and my nanny sees my kids way more than I do, and it's just
Wow.
really hard. And I was like, okay. Because here I was seeing her like so put
Mhm.
together and so accomplished, and she was all those things, she
Yeah.
was very accomplished, but it made me feel relief inside that I hate the fact that she was crying on the way home, but it's like,
Right.
okay, so you're just a mom like me who
Yeah.
really struggles with the pull of I love working and I love
Right.
being a mom. And
Yep.
sometimes those two things clash. So I think anytime we as moms of like an almost 18-year-old, I have a 17-year-old who's a boy
Uh-huh.
and a 14-year-old, that younger moms or newer moms or women who we know who work, just like letting our example and telling them the truth and letting them have a free place to say this is really really hard on us, to be like, yep, it
Yep.
is,
Yeah.
let's talk about it. And then I
Yeah.
think, once you do that and you decide that you want to unsubscribe from these beliefs, it's just noticing when you're doing it and then thinking, what do I want to think instead? So, for example, I used to have a thought in my head, never could see the thought or know it was there, but it was something like, I have to be perfect. And if I'm not, people won't like me. So
Yep.
that's the thought that just defaults into my head. And that's okay. It's just I have the opportunity to believe it or not. So
Mhm.
now when I find myself acting in a way that feels like perfectionism, I'm like, oh, there it is again. There's that old rule coming into play. And then I substitute in a thought that I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect, and perfect people are boring. That's my favorite part because it makes me laugh, because I'm like, exactly, who wants to have that like mom friend
Right.
who's
Yeah.
perfect, I
Right.
want the real one who like has on mismatched socks and like
Yep.
is running late or whatever. Like those are my people. And I think that's true for most people. So I think just learning to notice when you're doing it and then making a new choice, and make the new choice with your thoughts, but also with your actions too,
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
you're change how you're acting. For example, I mean, I talk all the time on my social media and my podcast and all those things about how I coach people to have more balance in their life. And there are times, like this week is a perfect example for me, where I really struggle with that as well. So, this is what I do full time. I've been doing this for 6 years. I've coached hundreds of women. And also, I'm totally overwhelmed this week, and that's
Yeah.
okay. It's like,
Mhm.
nobody's ever, it's not a problem to permanently solve. It's just
Right.
learning to ebb and flow with the changes that come up in life.
Yeah, and I know as a healthcare practitioner, so many in my field, and I've done this too. Like, I'm struggling with this health condition, and here I am trying to help people, and my health is still not to where I want it to be, right? And so
Yeah.
I have this perfectionist attitude, like I can't help anybody unless my life is. You're going back to your
Yes.
perfect, right? So, and I don't want to be boring. So let's just keep it interesting. And
Yeah.
world isn't perfect. I do get overwhelmed. You get overwhelmed. We all get overwhelmed. And it's just how do we work through that? And my job is to balance the brain so that when people come to work with you, they're able to process things more and make
Yeah.
those habit changes a lot better. And so I love that we're having this conversation because they marry each other very, very well.
Yes, I definitely think that's true. And I think it's interesting because I just have like a different version of that same exact thought, that if I'm teaching people how not to be overwhelmed, I have to be perfectly balanced at all times. And yours is like, I have to be perfectly healthy. But I like to think that those things happen to us so that we can continue to have empathy for our clients and understand how hard it is and work through all the things. Like practicing what I preach is a really important
Mhm.
part of me being a good coach, in my opinion. I don't know. I'm sure you
Oh,
probably feel the same
absolutely. I
way
mean, it makes
too.
me a better practitioner,
Yeah.
hands on, all the time. We're like, okay,
Yeah.
I have to research something else now. So
Yes, yeah, exactly, exactly.
yeah,
And
God always
it's
puts
fun
us
to
in the
keep
right spot.
learning and
Yeah.
experience things. And, when I started, my kids were pretty little. And so now to have teenagers, and I've got lots of clients whose kids are going to college. So I'm just always like learning new things, new life circumstances that can put us into overwhelm, and working through them myself and then helping my clients do it.
Yeah, because each season presents a different set of challenges.
Yeah.
What you're overwhelmed with when they're 3 or when you're newly married or you have a new job is completely
Yeah.
different when they're 18 and you're on year 20 and you're changing careers. I mean,
Yes.
so many different things. And so how do we navigate that? We want to navigate it well, but it still can look messy, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Messy is
exactly.
fine, right? I always,
Messy
I,
is
I
fine.
honestly hate those signs that say bless this mess, because
Yeah.
I don't want anybody to think like I have a mess, like that's where
Yeah.
my head is like, I don't want that sign in my house because I don't want a
Yes.
mess. But in reality, there's a mess.
Yes. Yes,
Don't look
exactly.
in my closet. Don't look.
Yeah. Sometimes there is, sometimes there's not, but it's sometimes for sure, for sure. I can put that on my forehead sometimes. Bless this
Right.
mess.
Thank you, Lord, bless us today. Yes.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what else do you teach to help overcome all these lies?
I basically I feel like it's all related to stress and overwhelm, and it's
Mhm.
helping people understand what are triggers for them.
Mhm.
So the be perfect without effort example, mine was about I have to be perfect to teach my clients, and yours was just a little different
Yeah,
version of that. And so I teach my clients to figure out what it feels like in their body when they feel overwhelmed. So do you know what yours is when you feel overwhelmed, like where you feel that feeling in your body?
I feel it here and like in my chest.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you were like pointing at your throat
Hmm.
and your chest. Yeah, that's interesting. So that can be such a great key for you to notice, oh, I feel that tightness in my
Hmm.
throat, like I'm maybe holding back saying something, or the
Yep.
pressure on my chest. And that can be just a really good shortcut to know, oh, I'm overwhelmed right now.
Mhm.
And so what is causing me to feel overwhelmed? Let me think about the situation. And then thinking about, for you, are there certain situations that make you feel overwhelmed, like certain circumstances?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I help people just figure out what those are.
Mhm.
One example that comes to mind always for me, I only have 2 kids, but for some reason, they always wanna talk to me at the same time. So when they're both talking to me
Right.
at the same time, it just makes me feel like everybody needs me and I can't, and then the dog starts barking because she needs food or whatever, and it's like,
Right.
"I
Right.
just can't do this, it's so much." So it's easier once I know that to say, "Oh, this is the kind of situation that makes me feel overwhelmed, so let me just notice that and be like,
Mhm.
"Okay, you're first, you're second, I'm gonna feed the dog after that," or,
Right.
whatever it is, to be able to just notice that it's there.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is that a lot of times we feel overwhelmed because we're following these rules, we're people pleasing, we're saying yes when we wanna say no, we don't have boundaries in place, and so I really like people to think about, if your calendar is too full or your life is too full, to take really radical responsibility and say that it is as full as you let it get. And
Yep.
if it's too full right now, no shame, no need to be mean to yourself, but just start taking responsibility for
Yep.
that and start learning to say no. Learning to say no, a lot of times for women, is a very difficult
Oh, yeah.
transition.
Yes,
Yeah.
very difficult. And I just did my whole calendar thing again because you let things creep in. And so this last winter into early spring, I was really quite sick because we had a mold issue in our house and it really
Oh,
affected me. And so I had like 3 months where I was kind of out of it and working on some things. And so I've been trying to catch up since then. And so
mhm.
my schedule, and we homeschool too. So, but I let clients and all those kind of things kind of creep into my schedule where I didn't normally let those creep in. And so we kind of had a little little meltdown in our family the other day. I'm like, okay, it's on me because I wasn't where I needed to be and to be present for what needed to be navigated at that moment, you know what I mean?
Yep.
At home. And so I went into my schedule and I'm like, block it off, block it off, block it off. And so, just really cutting back. And if people have to wait to see me, longer than, they're used to, then that's okay. Right? That's
Yes.
okay because we have to make sure that we're keeping first things first and that I don't lose my mind and feel overwhelmed in the process. Cause
Exactly, because then you won't be good at any of it. Being a
no, and I
parent,
don't want
being a
that.
teacher, being
Yeah.
a, helping your clients. I think that's a perfect example. And I think it's great that you pointed out too that stuff creeped onto your schedule almost from a place of guilt that you were behind.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
you started like putting that on. And so I always say just if your action is coming from the feeling of guilt, I would really pause and think about it because that's not
Absolutely.
a good feeling from which to take action. That's when we
No.
make decisions that we don't want to make, like saying yes to things we don't want to do.
Right. And then that builds
Sometimes it's hard.
resentment, right? So if we're doing it out of guilt and then we're doing the activity, we're like, and then that builds resentment towards
Yeah.
what we're doing or what our life looks like. And then,
Yep.
then you get in this vicious hamster wheel cycle.
Yes, yes, exactly. One thing I recommend too is when you say no to something, and especially if it was a little difficult and uncomfortable for you to say no, first of all, just remember that there's a difference between discomfort and like you're gonna die,
Right.
So just know that it'll probably feel a little uncomfortable, but nobody's gonna get hurt, nobody's gonna die, like everything is okay. And then I always recommend that my clients put that thing they said no to on their calendar. Like if I had said yes right now, I would be volunteering at my daughter's school all morning or,
Mhm.
whatever it is, so
Right.
that when you see it, you get that feedback of like, okay, I made this choice and
Yep.
that's why I'm free right now to work on this thing that really is a priority to me.
Right. Right. Oh, it's so good. I love that.
Yes, there's so much I think to making changes to become less overwhelmed, less stressed, less of a people pleaser, less of a yes woman. But and I think that even that alone can become overwhelming. But
Mhm.
what I would say is just take one tiny step in any of those directions. That's it. You
Mhm.
don't have to put a lot of pressure on yourself to go from being I was a major people pleaser. I very rarely said no to anything. I
Mhm.
just worked tons of hours. I had no boundaries. And now I would say that all that's cleared up, but it takes a while and it's
Oh
new
yeah.
skills and whatever. But you can make yourself feel better with just one little no. Let's say you say yes 20 times in a week, but you say no
Mhm.
one time. You can make a little bit of progress. So that's really what I would encourage people to do is just start small and
Yeah.
start working towards it.
Yeah. Because if it doesn't really resonate in your spirit, like, oh, I really, really want to do this, then just don't do it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I use something called the love and fit test where I have people ask, do I love this idea? And does it fit? But not does it fit on my calendar, but does it fit with the kind of life that I'm trying to create for
Right.
myself?
Yep.
And I was supposed to be going on a trip this week. It's my kid's first week of school. I booked the trip like in February and I really wanted to go. It's a whole bunch of life coaches, people I really like. I paid in full already, so I've already paid for it. And I loved the idea. And at the time, I was like, yes, it fits because I really want to grow my business and this will be
Mhm.
perfect. But the fit that superseded that was, do I want to be here to create a calm and steady environment
Right.
for my kids, which is my very number one priority on this earth.
That's fine.
So I decided to say no to it and, just had to let go of the money and the experience because I'm choosing the thing that's going to make our life feel more balanced and calm, which is the most important thing to me. So I had a big old, let's see if you're going to practice what you preach moment.
And you
Yes.
did it. Did you feel
Yeah.
guilty?
What's that?
Did you feel guilty?
I didn't feel guilty. Nope, I
Awesome.
didn't feel guilty. Nope, I did not, but I felt a lot of pressure in making the decision, and I
Uh-huh.
definitely noticed that what I was feeling pressured about was letting other people down, that they would be disappointed, that I made a bad decision and wasted money and all that stuff, so I had to
Right.
work through those thoughts and just get clear on those and realize, yeah, my friends will miss me just like I would miss them, but they're still gonna be just fine if I'm not there, and everything is gonna
And
be
there's more money where that came from, right? Like
yes,
if we don't
exactly.
attach to that, then we're free to get more.
I totally agree. I subscribe to that entirely. Yeah. So when I actually did communicate the no, it felt like just a world of weight off my shoulders because I knew that I had made a decision that was in alignment with my family.
Yeah, I love it. It's so, oh gosh, so important. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Was there anything that you want to leave our listeners with, Michelle?
I would say just if you are interested in these kind of topics, to check out my podcast, which is called Overwhelmed Working Woman. Every Monday morning, I put out a new one. It's like 12 to 20 minutes, short podcasts that have something like how to say no or how to be less of a people pleaser so that you can go from feeling overwhelmed to have one specific thing to try for the week. So if you're
Love it.
like these kind of topics, check that out.
Awesome. And it's a fantastic podcast. I've been listening to it. So thank
Oh,
you so
thank
much,
you.
Michelle. I appreciate you. And everybody, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. And I will see you in the next episode and have a fantastic week.